Donald Trump holds a rally to get the people out to vote for Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. Suitcasegate gets debunked. So we'll talk a bit about what's going on with that. The E Street Group is in more trouble as we sit back and look at what's going on between them and Ilhan Omar. And a Staten Island bar owner resists arrest and possibly hits a police officer with his car. All this and more. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning, folks. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar. What a weekend, guys. They just keep doing this kind of stuff, and then I look back on Sunday, I'm like, what the hell happened? Especially when I take a Sunday like I did yesterday. I can't look at screens all day. Because I do this literally all day, every day. Between my other job and this. Reading news, just staring at a screen all the time. I do this all the time. Sometimes on Sunday, I've had enough. And then I come back Sunday night and everybody's broken all their toys. And then I wake up to shit like this here. So I've got my Twitter feed up on the background instead of the usual Freedomscoop opener here because we usually do Twitter trending on Tuesday, but I saw this and I just said this is so unbelievably stupid at this point that they're doing this, that it's like they have nothing else left in their quiver. This is all that they have. So, trend today is Ann Coulter because apparently Kelly Loeffler is Walmart version Ann Coulter. So it's gonna be the racist thing now. They have nothing else. Nobody gave a fuck about the stocks. That was Occam's razor away. Nobody gives a fuck about what she's done while she was in the Senate. So now they're gonna try and throw the racism thing at her. They're getting desperate, people. They are getting desperate. And it looks like they might not have the same toys that they had for the general presidential election either. We'll talk a bit about what's going on in some of the counties with that. So it does seem like desperation is setting in for this one at least. So we'll talk a bit about that as we move along down here. But before we get started, head on over to freedomscoop.com. Freedomscoop.com is going to be your one-stop shop for all of your news and commentary needs, carrying great shows such as The Generational Gap, The Daily Ignoramus, The Freckles and Brit Show, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, and The Already Conservative. Come on over there, pick up some of our swag, and help us support great creators. All right, looking in on the Dow, looks like the Dow closed at 30,218.26, which would have been a record throughout Friday. But it also looks like the futures are drawing back just a little bit here. So we'll talk a bit about what's going on with the markets and get into the news, starting with Investors Business Daily. Dow Industrials futures slip as Apple targets Intel. Boeing rises on the first 737 MAX flight. This is from Alan R. Elliott. Stock futures backed off Monday with the Dow Industrials threatening to snap a 4-day run-up as investors await details on a $908 billion federal pandemic relief package. Some chip makers and oil producers came under early pressure. Moderna led a jump among coronavirus vaccine stocks as the first doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine were set to roll out. In the UK, Boeing jumped after the 737 MAX's first passenger-carrying flight in 22 months. Intel dove after news reports of increased chip competition from Apple. Dow Jones futures lagged 0.4% in the morning action. Intel dropped to the bottom of the index, down 1.8% after news report revealed plans by Apple to launch sometime in 2021 a series of processor chips aimed at outperforming Intel's fastest chips. Which is easy to do. I mean, that's one thing with Apple. And I don't use Apple except as a music player. It's a retired iPhone 5, but I use it as just a music and media player. I use it to listen to podcasts, so my phone doesn't get crammed up with all the podcasts that I've got sitting here waiting off the back. And even though I do listen at double speed, there's still a lot in my backlog. To the point that the memory on my iPhone is usually full. But processors and RAM in iPhones generally underperformed on anything that Samsung, LG, any of the big name Android makers did. And there's a reason for that. And it's the same thing where we saw underperforming chips on Macintosh and iMacs and MacBooks and everything else versus what you saw in Windows machines, because Windows machines generally had more powerful chipsets. But the difference being is that Apple's software only has to run macOS or iOS, depending on what you're using, on one specific device or a handful of devices, and they know what they need to run with. Whereas, so they can optimize their operating system to a very, very strict set of parameters, whereas Android has to work on the flagship Note 10 all the way down to whatever cheap Walmart piece of crap you can pick up off the shelf in a smartphone. And it's got to be adjustable to that. So they cram all kinds of performance into their flagships, but sometimes they still can't hang with what Apple can do with what they've got. So that's just a little bit of tech talk with that. Let's talk a little bit more about stocks. Dow Jones futures lagged 0.4% in the morning action. Intel dropped to the bottom of the index. I read that paragraph already. S&P 500 futures dipped nearly 0.4% below fair value, while Nasdaq 100 futures eased 1% or 0.1% on the stock market today. China's NetEase topped the Nasdaq 100 up 2% early. Chip makers were mixed, with Broadcom, Advanced Micro Devices, and Xilinx also trading high on the Nasdaq 100, while Intel fell to the bottom of the index. Although the Van Eck Vectors Semiconductor ETF moved 0.9% in early trade. Excuse me. Oil producers dragged on the S&P 500, with Occidental Petroleum down 2.5%. And Helmerich and Payne diving more than 4%, leading the index's 5 largest early declines after a pair of downgrades to sell. Among vaccine makers, Moderna jumped 2%. Shares ended Friday 60% above a 95.31 buy point after a November 6 breakout. Pfizer and Germany-based partner BioNTech each rose more than 1% as authorities in the UK prepared to roll out the first vaccine shots, and approval from US regulators was expected possibly within days. Stick that needle in your arm, as Ronnie Van Zant said. UK-based vaccine competitor AstraZeneca climbed 1.2% after an upgrade to overweight from Morgan Stanley. IBD leaderboard stocks Apple stock is in a buy range for aggressive investors. PayPal, FedEx, and Google parent Alphabet are hovering just above buy points at record highs. PayPal is also an IBD leaderboard stock. Google and FedEx are IBD swing trader listings. And they're not going to give me futures, so I know CNBC will. So that's what we're seeing coming up out of the stocks news. Looks like Apple's going to take everybody out because I want a Crapple product. It looks great. It's got rounded edges. It's got soft colors. It's wonderful. It makes me feel good. Never mind the people who have suicide nets outside their factories in China to make them. All right, let's keep going. From CNBC. The Dow is set to fall 100 points from our records to start the week amid jumping coronavirus cases. From Fred Imbert. Excuse me. U.S. stock futures fell on Monday following a record-setting session as Wall Street traders worried about rising coronavirus cases and searched for clues in additional fiscal aid. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures fell 112 points or 0.4%. The move implied an opening loss of more than 100 points. S&P 500 futures lost 0.4%. Nasdaq 100 futures fell slightly. In the near term, the risk of a modest equity market pullback has risen because the worsening situation in the U.S. could spur a positioning unwind, wrote Goldman Sachs equity strategist in a note on Monday, even though they're just going to pick up and move to Florida. And I have that notated down towards the end, so we'll talk a bit about that. Although vaccine approval in the U.S. appears imminent, increased restrictions or shutdowns in the U.S. could slow the near-term recovery in economic growth. Yeah, dude, I'm sorry. It's not about the vaccine. It's not about the disease at this point. It is about control. I like Brit's take from the Freckles and Brit show. You know, we should just stand in solidarity with all these leaders here and defy the coronavirus lockdowns just like they are. Solidarity, folks. On Thursday, more than 2,800 U.S. deaths from the disease were recorded, a new high, according to data compiled by Johns Hopkins University. Citation needed, please. More than 14 million COVID-19 cases have been confirmed in the U.S., along with other over 282,000 coronavirus-related deaths. Citation needed, please. Hospitalizations have also reached record levels in the U.S. Still, the major averages posted intraday and closing all-time highs on Friday, with Dow popping more than 200 points as investors looked ahead to coronavirus vaccines and possibly more fiscal aid. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ Composite advanced 0.9% and 0.7% respectively. Those Friday gains came even after the release of disappointing U.S. jobs data. The Labor Department reported that the 245,000 were created in November. Economists polled by Dow Jones forecast that 440,000 were added last month. So, bunch of stuff mixed throughout. They're looking, of course, to the omnibus spending. They're looking at whether or not the government shuts down in a few days, because we're going to throw another omnibus at the shit. I'm so fucking sick of omnibus packages. Make a fucking budget, you idiots. You're lawmakers. And the vaccine news, and the shutdowns, and nobody knows what the hell's going on. So, we'll see what's happening with that. Alright guys, let's get into the news. I gotta drop the background for just a sec here, because I gotta drop my hots. I can see that. Get over to that. Because you guys don't want to hear me peek out, I promise. And I keep doing that. I look over and I see it. Just a second. Oops, that's not the one I want. Sorry about that. A little bit on-air production, but I can see myself coming in too hot, and I can see myself peaking, and I don't want to do that to you guys all morning. So let me just toss that on quick. I say quick, and then it just takes for fucking ever. Oh, I guess it's down. So I don't know what's going on with that, but it's running hot, whatever it's doing. All right, let's get back to the news. Sorry about that. From CBS News, Trump makes multiple false claims in first campaign rally since election loss. In a rambling, unfocused speech on Saturday, President Trump aired grievances about the November election during a campaign rally ostensibly meant to boost Georgia Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue ahead of their runoff elections on January 5th. In his first campaign event since losing the presidential election last month, Mr. Trump continued to deny President-elect Joe Biden's victory, instead peddling falsehoods about voter fraud and baselessly claiming the election was rigged. It's rigged. I'm telling you, it's rigged. It was the worst rigging. The worst rigging. Yeah, well, a lot of the people that are working on this wanted to see him gone so bad that they are dirty, filthy riggers. Mr. Trump began the rally by incorrectly saying that he won the state. Well, we're still looking into that. And the signature audit has come up, so we will see what's happening with that. And was going to win the election, even though results have been certified in Georgia and several other states for Mr. Biden. We won Georgia, just so you know, Mr. Trump falsely said. We never lost an election. We're winning this election. It'll be the greatest election ever. With me, your favorite president. Mr. Trump had to walk a tightrope in his speech, imparting to his supporters that the November election was rigged, while still encouraging them to turn out to vote for Loeffler and Perdue. If Loeffler and Perdue both lose, that would give Democrats a razor-thin Senate majority of 50-50, with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, not Vice President-elect, breaking any tie. This presents a difficult scenario for Republicans who wish to impart that the runoff election is critical for blocking Democratic control of both legislative and executive branches and hindering the implementation of Mr. Biden's priorities, while also not acknowledging that it is so important because of Mr. Trump's loss. Excuse me. They cheated. They rigged our presidential election, but we'll still win it. Mr. Trump falsely said, while still encouraging voters to turn out for the runoff. And they're going to try and rig this election too. They're dirty riggers. They're filthy, filthy riggers. Riggers, I tell you. Mr. Trump appeared to acknowledge the dissonance in his arguments, saying that while it would be tempting to stay home if they believed the November election was rigged, we just have to do the opposite in January. He encouraged people to register to vote and vote early or vote by absentee ballot, even though he has repeatedly cast doubt on voting by mail. Loeffler and Perdue also briefly addressed the crowd invited onto the rally stage by the president. More than an hour into his remarks, both candidates praised the president and emphasized the importance of voting in January. If we don't vote, we will lose the country. If we vote, we will win, Loeffler said. Perdue said that he would ensure that Mr. Trump received a fair, square deal in Georgia. Perdue's words were interrupted by a chant from rallygoers shouting, "Fight for Trump." Though he touted Loeffler and Perdue's support for his policies and judicial nominees, the president spent most of his time talking about his own election rather than the Senate candidates. Mr. Trump rattled off statistics about the number of votes he received, correctly noting that 74 million votes. He won more votes than any other incumbent in the president. Mr. Biden won more than 80 million votes. And that's the part that I'm calling into question. The fact that Mr. Biden won 80 million votes, underperformed Hillary in most of the country, except for Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, Madison, and Milwaukee. Weird. And if you want me to believe, come on, man, set a record beating out, blowing out Barack Obama, you're going to have to do better than, come on, man, I got hairy legs. Mr. Trump made several false claims about there being widespread voter fraud. There's that fucking weasel word again. Even though his campaign has offered no evidence. They offer evidence, and then the court looks up and says, oh, hey, there's evidence. Well, nothing to see here. The Trump campaign has filed a new lawsuit in Georgia seeking to invalidate the state's election results. Although the vast majority of lawsuits brought by the campaign seeking to challenge the election in several states have failed. A lawsuit in Nevada, similar to the one just filed in Georgia, was dismissed with prejudice by a judge on Friday, who wrote in his ruling that the evidence they offered had little to no value and did not prove under any standard of proof the allegations of fraud and vote irregularities. So we will see what happens here, and of course, as we saw at the top of the show, they don't like Loeffler, and they want to tie her to Ann Coulter as quickly as they can. They got nothing. They tried to pull the stock thing. It failed. They've tried everything that they can on this woman, and it keeps falling flat. And I can't vote in the election. I can tell you what I see about it, but I mean, the thing with Powell and Linwood, well, just stay home because it's going to be rigged anyway. To hell with both of them. And the big one for that, of course, is, don't just stay home. Even if the left is going to try and cheat to win this, which I believe that they are. They desperately feel the need to have the Senate. And there's always Joe Manchin, too. But they desperately feel the need to have the Senate. Just as desperately as they felt that they needed to have the White House. Even still, even if they're going to cheat, don't let that black pill you. Get out there and give them an impossible hurdle to go over. If they're going to cheat, make them fucking work for it, is essentially where I'm going with that. Don't make it easy for them. Make them work for it. And that goes to both sides, too. There are people that suggested that George W. Bush cheated. And that they weren't going to go vote because the Bush camp was just going to go and cheat it. Well, give them that impossible hurdle to get over. Always, even if you think your opponent is cheating, work harder. And that's not just in electioneering, that's in everything. Always work harder. Even if you think your opponent is cheating, work harder. Give him that hurdle to clear. No matter what. So, we'll see what happens up out of Georgia. Let's keep going. From the Daily Wire. Watch. Raphael Warnock repeatedly refuses to answer if he supports court packing. from Ryan Saavedra. Georgia Democrat Senate candidate Raphael Warnock repeatedly refused to answer during a debate on Sunday night whether he supports packing the U.S. Supreme Court. Supreme Court packing, which is something that the majority of Americans oppose, has gained steam among the left wing of the Democratic Party over the past couple years since President Trump was afforded the opportunity to appoint multiple Supreme Court justices. Warnock is running against Senator Kelly Loeffler, who repeatedly referred to him throughout the debate as radical liberal Raphael Warnock. A moderator asked Warnock, if Democrats do win control of the U.S. Senate, there will be pressure to increase the size of the U.S. Supreme Court. Would you support adding more justices to the Supreme Court to offset President Trump's recent appointments? Warnock completely ignored the question, claiming, I want to point out that Kelly Loeffler actually voted to defund the police. And as I move across the state, people aren't asking about the courts and whether we should expand the courts, he later added. I know that's an interesting question for people inside the Beltway to discuss. Looks like we can actually listen to this too. But first we've got to cut the autoplay that's going on in this window. So we'll let them just yell into the atmosphere, and let's have a listen to what they're saying over here.
If Democrats do win control of the U.S. Senate, there will be pressure to increase the size of the U.S. Supreme Court. Would you support adding more justices to the Supreme Court to offset President Trump's recent appointments? And do you think there needs to be term limits for justices on the bench?
I want to point out that Kelly Loeffler actually voted to defund the police. She voted against the COPS program. She was one of only 10 United States senators who did. I don't think we should defund the police, but we certainly do need criminal justice reform. We need to make sure that we have an independent review process when civilians die at the hands of police. We need to make sure that police and officers and departments that have a pattern of misconduct are held accountable. We can do that and celebrate police at the same time. And as I move all across the state, Greg, people aren't asking me about the courts and whether we should expand the courts. I know that's an interesting question for people inside the Beltway to discuss, but they're wondering when in the world are they going to get some COVID-19 relief? They haven't gotten any from Kelly Loeffler in months. And when she had a chance to stand up for ordinary people, she thought $600 was too much. Meanwhile, she was busy dumping millions of dollars of stock, profiting from a pandemic. Who does that?
But it will impact people on the ground. So I am wondering if you can answer the question, do you support expanding the Supreme Court?
I'm really not focused on it.
And there it is. He's really not focused on it. The good Reverend. And I do like the fact that at the end, the moderator came back and said, Mr. Reverend Warnock, will you please answer the question? So we will see what happens with that and whether or not he does pack the Supreme Court. Let's keep going. From KTAR.com. Wow, this looks like eye cancer. But we'll go with it. Let's turn the autoplay protection off here. Arizona GOP lawmakers seek audit of Maricopa County voting equipment. From Kevin Stone. 4 Republican leaders in the Arizona legislature are calling for an audit of Maricopa County's election equipment and software. Senate President Karen Fann and Speaker of the House Rusty Bowers, along with Senate Government Chair Michelle Urgenti-Rita and House Majority Leader Warren Peterson, issued a press release on the matter on Friday after a numerous phone calls with members of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. The 5-board member, which has 4 Republicans, unanimously certified the county's results November 20th, after hearing extensive reports from election officials who said the vote count was correct and noted that all tests and hand count reviews showed the electronic ballot count was 100% accurate. In a free democracy, election results in some people's candidates losing, Chairman Clint Hickman said at the time, I was disappointed in the outcome of a couple races and I was extremely happy with the outcome in others, but I'm not going to violate the law or deviate from my own moral compass, as some have pushed me to do. Despite having voted to certify the results. Supervisor Steve Chukri told KTAR News 92.3 FM's The Mike Broomhead Show on Thursday that he's open to having the county's tabulation machines audited by a third party. Let's get all the concerns from both sides, Republicans and Democrats, answered and make sure that everyone has a higher level of confidence in our election system, he said. No Democrats have raised concerns about the integrity of Arizona's election system. The Republican legislator's statement doesn't question the results of any specific race. Despite continued pressure from surrogates of President Donald Trump, Republican Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers said Friday the state legislature cannot and will not overturn the certification on November 3rd's election results. Each of the four represent districts that are located fully or partially in Maricopa County, and they all handily won re-election on equipment that they are questioning. Additionally, Republican Stephen Richer, a political newcomer, unseated Maricopa County's top elections official, Recorder Adrian Fontes. And that is, it would be nice to see if there's something wrong, a decertification. But they're saying that they can't do that by their state laws. I think the courts would have something else to say about that, but they're saying that they can't. However, and this is the important part, the important part of this race right now is not going to be who wins. The important part is getting to the bottom of why people feel no faith in any of this. And I do need to be shown the numbers. I really do. I need to be shown all the numbers with this, because none of this adds up to me. Joe Biden, author of the 1994 crime bill, getting a larger percentage of the black vote than Barack Obama. None of that adds up to me in my head. Statistically, none of this makes sense. So at least get this fixed for next time. That's going to be the important part right now, not necessarily who won and who lost. Especially with another runoff coming up that's going to determine which way the Senate goes. So we'll see what happens out of that. Let's keep going. From our neighbors to the north, judge orders audit of Antrim County's 22 voter tabulators. From Madison Schlegel. This is in Michigan. Antrim County is going to be as transparent as possible about the results in the 2020 election. Now that the 13th Circuit Court Judge Eisenheimer has given the green light to a forensic audit of the results, they're standing back. Antrim County Deputy Administrator Jeremy Scott says they're trying to clear up that there's no malfeasance on the actual software and hardware end of it. There's nothing going on there that's tampering with the election results. The county itself is confident in the results. The plaintiffs of the lawsuit, William Bailey, along with the Allied Security Operations Group, is taking the data from the county's 22 vote tabulators to investigate if it was the software that caused the initial inaccuracies. Scott says there are tapes that printed out from the tabulator box. That's actually what the official election results are based upon. But there's also compact flashcards that are brought back to the county so that we can put them into our election computer that adds up all the results from all the precincts, and that's ultimately where the problem happened. Now, some are relieved that answers are on the way. I do believe that it's the best process in the country, or in the world actually, but without accountability, anything we do, if we don't have the accountability, it's lost, and we need to stand up, said Scott. Even though the results from the audit won't affect the outcome of who won the presidency, one of President Trump's atoners say that they should have the results in the next 2 days. So, looking forward to that, I believe this is from Friday or Saturday, so we should be... No, this is from today, so we'll see this on Wednesday. So we'll see what happens with this. And I want to see where this goes. I really do. I don't care who won at this point. I want to make sure that the next one is without any sort of flaw. Not only will that help people be confident in who they vote for, which I don't think anybody's going to be confident, no matter which direction this goes. No matter if the president overturns this, it's going to be the left throwing a fit, and if he doesn't, the right is going to be throwing a fit. Nobody's going to buy this election for the next 4 years. No matter what happens, nobody's going to buy this election for the next 4 years. But this will give people the confidence that they can go forward in the next election confidently that the results are going to be accurate. And furthermore, if there is malfeasance, even if it can't overturn the presidency, you get an asterisk presidency. Biden's hands are tied for the rest of his presidency because everybody knows at that point that he cheated, which his hands are tied anyway because Kamala Harris is cackling, sitting, waiting in the wings to take over for him. And furthermore, we get more freshman incumbents ready to come up and challenge some of these seats. I would love to see that more than anything else. The system gets shored up so more people can get up and run and primary some of these people, knowing full well that the votes for them will be counted. So we will see what happens from this. Line report from Ryan Saavedra. Justice Samuel Alito ordered Pennsylvania state officials to respond to Representative Mike Kelly's election challenge a day sooner than previously ordered, which forces them to do so before the safe harbor deadline. The safe harbor deadline is the date set by the federal government that the states choose their electors. Alito had previously ordered the officials to respond to Kelly by Wednesday, a day after the deadline, which many read as a signal that the Supreme Court had no intention of getting involved in the case. Kelly has argued that Pennsylvania lawmakers improperly expanded voting by mail in the state last year with a vote in the state legislature instead of submitting the charge through the constitutional amendment process, which would have required a statewide ballot question, among other procedural steps, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported. But in throwing out this case, November 28th, Pennsylvania Supreme Court said Kelly had waited far too long to file his legal challenge and noted it had only come after his favored candidate, Trump, had lost the election. Richard L. Hassan, an election law professor at the University of California, Irvine, wrote that the new deadline for officials to respond to Kelly allows the court, at least in theory, to issue some relief by the end of the safe harbor day. I would not read too much into this. It shows more respect to the petitioners and does not make it look like the court is simply running out the clock on the petition, Hassan added. Excuse me. I still think the chances the court grants any relief on this particular petition are virtually zero. Last month, constitutional legal scholar Alan Dershowitz, who represented Trump during impeachment, told Fox News that he did not think that Trump's legal efforts would upend the results of the election, but that he thinks that the case in Pennsylvania could be a case they win at the Supreme Court. So we'll see what happens with this. They're actually going to hear it, which I'm glad for. It looked like they weren't going to hear it in time to do anything about it, but they're actually going to hear it, which means, at least to me, I'm just a guy who yells into a microphone, so take that for what it's worth, but to me, it looks like they actually think that there's something that could change something. Otherwise, they would just kick the can down the road. So we'll see what comes off of this. We'll start getting ready to hear this, and whether or not this is actually legal. We'll see. All right, let's check out with this one that's trying to autoplay here so we can get it out of the way. Hey, look, it's the debate again. From 11 Alive out of Atlanta, fact-checking claims about Fulton County's election. These suitcases are actually ballot containers. From Brandon Keefe. That's it, guys. The election's over. We can go home. 11 Alive made the definitive definition. They're just ballot containers. They're not suitcases. From Atlanta, President Donald Trump's team is pointing to a newly released surveillance video from State Farm Arena as evidence of election fraud. 11 Alive is taking a look at the video and claims to separate fact from fiction. The video was shown Thursday in the state Senate hearing, but state investigators confirmed that they've had it for weeks and determined Fulton County was legally county ballots. There is more to the story, however. Yeah, I saw the 4 suitcases come out from underneath the table, said Jackie Pick, a Trump attorney. I'm going to call it a suitcase, Pick said. Supporters of the president are calling it #Suitcasegate on social media. However, they're not suitcases. 11 Alive confirmed that they're the standard ballot containers used by Fulton County. Okay. That's all well and good. If that's what they want to use to transport ballots, that's fine. But why? And we saw the surveillance. We looked at it. Why were they hidden under the table, first and foremost? Why were they hidden under the table? And why did they only come out after the poll watchers were sent home for the night? That's the problem, not what they were transported in. That is the problem. They could have been in a bin, in a big white bin that said U.S. Mail or U.S. Election Official on the side. And I would still be wondering why they were yanked out from under a table as soon as the electors were kicked out. Or I'm sorry, the poll watchers were kicked out for the night. It doesn't matter what they were transported in. But yeah, just keep focusing on this so you can come out and say, QAnon, they're trying to overturn the election, QAnon. But that's what we're seeing off of that. Let's keep going. I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know if this is satire or not, but it's from the Daily Wire. But I know that they put Andrew Klavan's satire up on the website from time to time. Congressman introduces bill requiring voters to be alive to cast ballots. Would withhold federal money from Departments of Transportation and Education, from Joseph Curl. Talk about controversial. Representative Brian Babin last week proposed a new bill, the You Must Be Alive to Vote Act. Let's call it YMBAVA. YMBAVA's intent is simple: to require states to obtain information from the Social Security Administration on deaths for purposes of voter registration list maintenance and for other purposes. The bill comes amid charges by President Trump and others of vote fraud, especially that ballots of deceased individuals were cast absentee in the 2020 presidential election. The right to vote is one of the most vital pillars of our democracy, the foundations of which are election integrity and confidence in our democratic processes, Babin said in a statement. The ease with which someone is able to steal the ballot of a deceased person and cast an illegitimate vote should disturb, alarm, and outrage every American, no matter what side of the aisle they sit on. To protect our democratic process and Americans' faith in our elections, we must ensure that deceased individuals are not allowed to remain on state voter rolls. Well, this goes along with the question that's hit the Wisconsin Supreme Court at numerous times. And I mean, it's a humorous way to go about it, but it does address some of the problems that some of the states are seeing. And as I mentioned on the show, we do need to look at voter rolls and get them purged. I am in favor if your state has same-day registration and voter ID as soon as the elections are finalized, which at this point is going to be at the last possible second because CNN needs it to sell more commercials. And once again, this is just a gigantic reality show anyway, but as soon as everything is certified and tabulated from the every other year election, just clear all the voter rolls entirely, purge them all, and have everybody re-register every other year. And then you don't have the excuse, well, they purged the voter rolls and now I can't go vote because I can't register. Well, you have same-day registration. Bring your driver's license up to the polling place and register. It's that easy. It's something we need to address. It really is. Like I said, this is a humorous way to do it, but something we definitely need to look into. So thank you, Representative Babin, for the You Must Be Alive to Vote Act. From Fox News, firm co-owned by Ilhan Omar's husband received $500,000 in COVID-19 bailout on top of millions from her campaign. From Bradford Betts. A D.C.-based consulting firm co-owned by Democratic Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar's husband received millions from her campaign and was eligible for more than $500,000 in coronavirus bailout money. Public records show that the E Street Group, not to be confused with the E Street Band, co-owned by Omar's husband, Tim Minette, received nearly $135,000 in Paycheck Protection Program loans and $500,000 in economic injury disaster loans. Campaign finance filings also show that the firm raked in millions during the 2020 campaign from Omar. The payments included $110,000 for digital advertising, split in 3 payouts, $5,000 for digital consulting, $12,000 for fundraising consulting, and more than $11,000 for digital and literature production between late October and the day after the general election. The bailout loans are intended to provide relief to small businesses that have been economically hard hit by coronavirus lockdowns. E Street Group's LinkedIn profile states that it has between 11 and 50 employees. Federal Election Commission's filings also show that the firm received payments for other campaigns, including $175,000 from the campaign of Representative Pramila Jayapal and nearly $130,000 from the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. Omar pledged in mid-November that she was cutting ties with her husband's firm, and the payments were made before that. Before their marriage in March, Minette's firm was already doing work for Omar's campaign. And Minette was already doing work on Omar. I'm waiting for somebody to throw hey-o in the live chat. And this is the problem that we're seeing here. Now, this is a business that had nothing to do with service industry, and these rich politicians are still pumping money to them even though they're getting this money. There should be an audit on who was able to get Paycheck Protection Program loans and economic injury disaster loans. There should be an audit on that at this point, because they're just passing out free money to their buddies, like Tim Minette and his E Street Group. These people are embezzling off of your dime because nobody took the time to audit him. You remember we saw the guy in Florida who got like $1 million in Paycheck Protection loan for several small businesses that may or may not have even existed. And they only found out about him after he crashed up the Lambo that he fucking bought. There needs to be an audit. There's so much waste. There's so much bloat. And there's so much reason why we're $28 trillion in debt right now. And part of it is this: funneling money through advising groups that, now that they're married, Ilhan has full access to. So, we will see what happens with that. Kevin McCarthy has an interesting thing to point out here. Let's get your ears on and let's have a listen to that. House Democrats have scheduled 101 days of work next year, a 25% reduction. 101 working days for the whole year. Let's have a listen.
It will probably become the laziest Congress we have ever had. It will probably become the laziest Congress we have ever had.
Now, I wasn't able to verify this, but I'll be watching for this as the weeks go along here. But yeah, 101 working days in a year. How does that work? What do we normally work? 5 days a week, times 52. So probably 260 days a year. Most of us work. And a lot of us work 365 days too. But I mean, for the most part, with the union mandated 5 days a week and non-mandatory overtime, especially in something, it's got to be like 260 days a year that most of us work. And now Congress is only going for 101 days. And the worst part is, if I got elected into Congress for whatever reason, I couldn't even go up and set the bar and work all these days because everyone else is going to be out. I'm campaigning. I'm doing something. All right, let's keep going. From CBS 2, I got a couple from them. Staten Island bar owner arrested again for violating COVID-19 order. Hit deputy with car, NYC sheriff says. This is... Oh, they don't give an author for this one, do they? Oh, that's lame. This is from a robot, apparently. The co-owner of a Staten Island bar that authorities said has been defying coronavirus restrictions was arrested early Sunday after hitting a New York City sheriff's deputy car. New York City has its own sheriffs. I thought it was New York County. Authorities said Danny Presti fled from his bar, Max Public House, after deputies observed patrons entering the establishment Saturday night in violation of a city and state closure orders, Sheriff Joseph Fucito said. Deputies attempted to arrest Presti as he left the bar early Sunday, But he got into his car, struck a deputy, and kept driving for about 100 yards, even as the deputy was left hanging onto the hood, Fucito said. Presti, 34, was eventually stopped and taken into custody, the sheriff said. He has been charged with assault, the NYPD confirmed. Fucito told CBS 2's Corey James that the deputies were in standard police uniform and identified themselves as law enforcement officers, adding the deputy who was struck suffered broken bones in both legs. Now, of course, I've got questions about this, and I have to wonder, especially if the police are coming up and doing this. Now, I'm okay with backing the blue, as long as they're out, being a human shield against people that they're trying to serve and protect. But they took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and they're violating the Constitution by going up and telling people that they cannot peacefully assemble. That's against the First Amendment. And I also have to wonder here, and I was listening to Beauty and the Beta last night, and Matt pointed out something I hadn't thought of when I first looked at this article yesterday, and that's the fact that I don't know if these police officers were actually going in and just glanced blindside by a guy who was trying to flee, or if they were doing the Black Lives Matter thing and, I dare you to hit me. What are you going to do? Are you going to run me over? Am I just going to jump in front of the car? What are you going to do? And I got into an argument with some communist over on Twitter one day where he said the same thing. Well, we're going to non-violently stop you by standing in front of the car that you're using to take away the means of production. Yeah, I got nothing but time and I'll sit here and wait, but most people who put their life's work into building a business are not going to stand idly by while you stand in front of their truck that they're moving their crap out of their factory with. It's not going to happen. And you're going to have a bunch of dead communists sitting there, and they're not going to care. Because you are trying to steal from them. You are trying to aggress on them. So I do have to wonder if that's what happened here. If they tried to do this and challenge him, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And that's what happened. Or if the guy did just aggress on him. Because, of course, the article makes it sound like the business owner was the aggressor and he went out of his way to go hit the deputy. But I have questions. I have a lot of questions. I don't trust police officers at this point, especially in a place like New York City. All right, let's keep going. From Fox News. Oh, we're going to have autoplay. Let's let that load up here. Oregon doctor who refused to wear mask has medical license suspended. From Caitlin McFall. Shut up, you. Nobody likes you. The Oregon Medical Board suspended the license of Dr. Stephen Latulippe, who said he refused to wear a mask in his clinic and encouraged others to do the same. Latulippe announced at a pro-Trump rally on November 7th that he and his staff skipped masking and denoted the coronavirus pandemic, which has infected over 14.5 million Americans and killed more than 281,000, citation needed please, as a common cold. I want to expose what I call coronamania, Latulippe said in a video posted to YouTube by the Multnomah County Republican Party. I and my staff, none of us, not once, wore a mask in the clinic, Latulippe said. Take off the mask of shame. Members of the Oregon Medical Board voted Thursday to revoke Latulippe's medical license indefinitely, reported local news outlet Fox 61. The board's website reportedly said that it made the decision based on the board's concern for the safety and welfare of licensees' current and future patients. The board also found that Latulippe told patients seeking his guidance in July not to get tested if they were asymptomatic, and that wearing a mask is ineffective, contrary to what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention advise, reported NBC News. No, trust the science, but our science. Don't trust, somebody who's studied family practice for years and has run a business like that, who deals with some of this stuff every day. Trust our science. Not the science, our science. It's like that trope that went around a few years ago. Well, you have the truth. We have our truth. And I hope he moves and takes his taxes with him somewhere else. I really do. I bet you other states, especially if the ICUs are packed, like they keep saying that they are, will give them a medical license, especially if it's done on political means. So we'll see what happens with this. Let's keep going. From CBS 2 once again. Agora Hills restaurant at risk of losing licenses after operating in defiance of outdoor dining ban, from CBS LA staff. An Agora Hills restaurant is at risk of no longer being able to operate after continuing to serve customers in defiance of the LA County ban on outdoor dining. Cronies Sports Bar has been serving customers for outdoor dining despite repeated visitors by health inspectors, reminding owners of the local health orders. Agora Hills City Council member Deborah Klein-Lopez wrote on social media Saturday morning. Due to continued violations, LA County Public Health suspended Cronies' health permit, meaning they are now prohibited from operating at all, she wrote in the Post. Currently, they have no permit to operate indoor, outdoor, or provide curbside, takeout, delivery. In addition, due to having no valid health permit, Cronies will be subject to losing their business license and liquor license. In the Post, Lopez said that the city has been receiving complaints about the sports bar's continued operation, and health inspectors had visited the establishment multiple times to remind them of the local health order. The owner said they understood the order, yet intended to continue patio dining services, she wrote. County public health officials visited the restaurant 3 times, according to Lopez. Upon the 3rd visit, they were fined between $1,000 and $1,500. Southern California is expected to fall under a regional stay-at-home order this weekend after Gavin Newsom issued an executive order earlier in the week forcing regions that fall under 15% ICU capacity to impose stricter guidelines. The region's ICU capacity was 13.1% because of the growing number of coronavirus cases, the California Department of Public Health announced Friday night. And from what I understand, and they didn't go into it in this particular article, in the location where this was, the line for the zone, because it's orange zone, red zone, etc., because of ICU capacity, the line for the zone was apparently like the street that this restaurant sat on. So the movie yard across the street from the place is up and running and going at full force. But Cronies Sports Bar has to shut down, to the point that they lost their license. I don't know what's going to happen with the owner of Cronies Sports Bar. I really don't. I hope that they get up and get out of Los Angeles, in spite of the fact that it's probably one of the most lucrative places to go and have people come in and work for you and have people come and buy for you, especially if you're right across the street from a movie yard, because, these people are getting paid fairly well to go and work on a movie, and they want to come across the street, go to the sports bar and watch some sports and drink some beers and eat some wings. But if the state is going to treat you like that, I wouldn't stick around, especially if I experience opening and running a sports bar. I would be in Idaho so fast, ripping up my Democratic membership, if that's what the Democrat governance of California wanted to do to me. I would be in some flyover state so fast, opening that sports bar again, for pennies on the dollar of what I was paying in Los Angeles, with a finger up at whoever the local Democrat politician was. All right. So that's what we're seeing up out of Los Angeles. Let's keep going here. From the New York Post. CNN suddenly reports COVID truth after spewing anti-Trump propaganda, from Stephen W. Mosher. CNN has just breathlessly announced that it uncovered a vast trove of leaked documents showing China underreported COVID-19 numbers and deliberately covered up the seriousness of the epidemic. The only trouble with CNN's blockbuster is that it's almost a year old. The rest of the world has known since February or so that China's communist leaders hid the epidemic from the world as long as they could. After the outbreak began late last year, the city of Wuhan, they silenced their own doctors and blocked visits from outside medical investigators. They lied about the virus that the WHO, and then got the WHO to lie for them. They allowed travelers from China to spread the virus to more than 180 countries At the same time, they were putting tens of millions of their own people in quarantine. Beijing did all this while reporting such ridiculously low numbers of cases and deaths that most credible news organizations were skeptical. Real journalists, such as those who work at our government-funded Radio Free Asia, started digging. RFA reported at the end of March that the death toll in Wuhan is many times higher than the 2,500 or so that Beijing was claiming at the time. As bodies piled up, the city's crematoria and truckloads of funeral urns arrived for ashes of the deceased. They estimated the actual number of coronavirus victims at 46,800 in one city. CNN, on the other hand, swallowed Beijing's narrative and their little cocks whole and soon began regurgitating its own propaganda in the same fashion. On April 15th, 2020, for example, CNN reported that not a single serving member of the country's military had been infected. America, however, wasn't doing so well. The reported absence of cases among China's armed forces comes despite the fact that thousands of military personnel were sent to Wuhan to assist in frontline medical efforts. It also comes in sharp contrast to the United States, which has seen an uptick in cases in the recent weeks. And yet, 99.9% survival rate, so honestly, I don't really see what the big deal is. I really don't. They're going to try and tell you that this is some scandal. And really all it is a slightly deadlier version of the common cold. And the common cold is a coronavirus. But, I mean, at least CNN is coming out and saying, oh, well, yeah, no, China's doing bad. They're doing really, really bad here. Here's the real numbers now that we're not trying to win an election. And people on social media kept saying this too. Whoa, why is Australia doing so well? Well, they're an island nation. They have an almost zero-tolerance immigration policy. And they're not trying to unseat an unpopular incumbent currently. It's all a psyop, guys. It really is at this point. It's all about control. All right, I got just a few more here. Then we'll do something that restores my faith in humanity and head on out of here for the day. Judge orders Trump administration to restore DACA, accept new applications. From Tal Axelrod. A federal judge on Friday ordered the Trump administration to fully restore the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which protects undocumented immigrants brought into the U.S. as minors from deportation, scoring a key win for immigrant advocacy groups. The ruling from U.S. District Judge Nicholas Garofis, a Clinton appointee, restores the Obama-era program and also mandates that the Department of Homeland Security post a public notice by Monday saying it's accepting new applicants. It would mark the first time since 2017 that the government has admitted new immigrants into the program. And once again, now we are going to have a bigger cudgel to beat down Republicans with in 4 years. When Joe Biden or Kamala Harris comes up for re-election, and now they're going to say, oh, the evil Republican, all he wants to do is shut down the DACA program, and look how charitable we are. We're just going to let these people stay in the country. And here's some paperwork to make sure that they can't get deported. Look how charitable and wonderful we are. I mean, they've never known their home country, have they? Look at how wonderful we are, these evil Republicans. Look at what they're going to do. It is a crime what they're going to do. Vote for me, please. And more people are going to be put into immigration limbo. And I always say immigration limbo because that's what it is. It's Schrodinger's immigration status when you're on the DACA program. Once you're on the DACA program, you're neither legal nor illegal. You're just kind of hanging there in limbo. You can't vote. You can serve the country because we need our human shields. You can't vote. You can't make any major policy prescription. You can work because you can pay taxes. And you are there as a pawn to use on the massive chessboard every time a Republican wants to get elected. I don't like the idea. I understand the fact that these kids have never known their home country. But looking at the situation at hand, as things go, the way that everything goes along with this, at this point, it would be more merciful to just deport them. Then they know. As of right now, they have to sit scared every time because they hear the propaganda, of course, but they have to sit scared knowing that they have no idea if somebody's going to come back and overturn their immigration status. And suddenly, they're an illegal immigrant in the only country that they've known. If they get deported, at least they know. Now, of course, I'm actually an advocate because of the fact that they've kept their nose clean, because they have to keep their noses clean to stay in the program, that they have the proper documentation. I am in favor of using that documentation to get them a pathway to citizenship. I know that a few of my friends are in contest with me of this, but at this point, then they know. And then, of course, they can't be used as a political prop every 4 years. Oh, that evil Republican that's running for president, he's just going to EO away the DACA program and it's going to be gone. Don't you know? Don't you have any compassion? Think of the children. Sir, the children are 38. Think of the children, God damn it! So, now they're going to be taking more people. Let's keep going. From Fox, Seattle Socialist Councilwoman in bitter recall fight. From Sam Dorman. A bitter political battle has broken out in Seattle, where one of the city's council members is facing a recall effort led by residents who expressed dismay over her conduct during recent protests. On Thursday, Seattle resident Ernest Liu made his case again for the recall effort, which he based on 4 specific charges relating to how Councilwoman Kshama Sawant allegedly abused her office. Specifically, Liu alleges that Sawant led protesters into City Hall during a nighttime protest and spoke at another demonstration in front of the Democratic mayor, Jenny Durkin's house. Now, I do have to wonder if they can actually impeach her and remove her from office, because to recall is to say, okay, well, we fucked up. Let's have another election and get rid of this person. That's what a recall is. But impeachment comes with a specific criminal charge, and depending on what they have for information here, there would be a criminal charge involved, and if she did it while in office, then she is eligible for impeachment by the regular definition of impeachment. But I know some states don't have impeachment clauses in their constitutions. They only have recall provisions. That's the word I was looking for. I believe in Wisconsin we don't have an impeachment provision in our Constitution. I think we can just recall if a politician does something stupid in his election. I will look into that because I don't know that for sure, but I know that Walker, when he did Act 10, got recalled. So that would be interesting to see. I would be interested to see if this does come with a removal from office and then a criminal charge to go with it. So we'll see what happens with that. But yes, at this point, Sawant is facing down another recall effort. All right. From the New York Post. Goldman Sachs eyeing Florida move for key division, report says, from Kate Sheehy. Goldman Sachs is eyeing a move to Florida for one of its key divisions in what could be yet another major blow to New York City's position at the helm of the financial industry, a new report says. Reminder to your finance guys, to your people like Goldman Sachs that are moving, to HP moving to Texas, to Tesla moving to Texas, to Joe Rogan moving to Texas. You guys tried DMT? A reminder to all of these people, if you're going to move out of the states that progressives have wrecked, leave your voting patterns at home. You are free to move and go wherever you want. But if you're going to go to a place like Florida, heavily conservative place like Florida, relatively low taxed place like Florida, or leave San Francisco or Silicon Valley to go to Texas, leave your voting pattern at home. Do not vote to turn these places into the same shitholes that you left. The Financial Titan is considering relocating its $8 billion revenue-generating asset management arm to Palm Beach or Fort Lauderdale. checking out potential real estate, chatting up local officials, and weighing the Sunshine State's tax advantages, sources told Bloomberg. Well, like I said, you're going to weigh the Sunshine State's tax advantages. Don't go in and vote to bring your fucking taxes with you. The potential development comes on the heels of several other investment companies moving from the Big Apple to down south and battering New York's bottom line with the loss of white-collar jobs. And yet AOC Biscuit is going to come in and brag about the fact that she cost the city 35,000 jobs, including, I believe, 30,000 of those were white-collar jobs, because that was going to be a headquarters. That wasn't going to be another distribution center. And there's now the most office space empty in Manhattan since right after 9/11, Bloomberg said. As the Post reported in October, billionaire Paul Singer has decided to move the headquarters of his hedge fund Elliott Management from Manhattan to Florida, according to sources, while Carl Icahn also made the switch for his offices. Florida offers tax advantages, not to mention warmer weather, appreciated by at least some Manhattan-weary workers. So, Goldman Sachs is coming up and getting out of New York because they're getting taxed to death, and they're going to Florida. Enjoy Florida, enjoy the jobs. Don't let them vote away your low tax status. All right, one more, then we'll do a thing that restores my faith in humanity, and we'll head on out of here for the day and head over to the Daily Ignoramus. Proving, once again, that Democrats are not completely useless, because you know, and you've looked at the vote, and you know that the Jesus Republicans were never going to vote for this to go through. Let me check the Discord here quick, because I actually thought that I had the vote pattern on this. May I have a second here? Sorry, on-air production. I didn't think to grab this and put it up on the stack so we could look at it. Yep, there it is. That's the one that I want right there. So let's add this up to the stack here so we can see where the vote lie. Lie? I don't know. But while we're doing this, we'll read this here. Maybe not. Anyway. So there is the final vote tally once it loads. Thank you to Public Citizen for this. Breaking, the House just passed a bill to decriminalize marijuana at the federal level, a historic moment. Democrats 222 to 6, yay to nay. Republicans 5 to 158, yay to nay. And one, Mr. Justin Amash, independently saying, yeah, let's do this. In case you ever question that Justin Amash was actually a Republican. It looked like it was pretty well on party lines. But let's see what CNN has to say about this. House passes bill decriminalizing marijuana at the federal level, from Veronica Strachwalursi and Lauren Dzenski. The House of Representatives has approved legislation that would decriminalize marijuana and seek to address devastating injustices caused by the war on drugs. You know who won the war on drugs? Drugs. Friday's vote in the Democratic-led House is the first time a chamber of Congress has voted on federal marijuana decriminalization. It has little chance of passing the Republican-led Senate, however. The bill passed largely along party lines. 222 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and Justin Amash, a libertarian, voted in support, while 158 Republicans and 6 Democrats voted against. The Republicans who voted for the bill are Matt Gaetz, the bill's co-sponsor, as well as Brian Mast, Tom McClintock, Denver Riggleman, and Don Young. The Democrats against were Representatives Cherry Bustos and Dan Lipinski of Illinois, Henry Quiller of Texas, Connor Lamb of Pennsylvania, Chris Pappas of New Hampshire, and Colin Peterson of Minnesota. I am not surprised that Cherry Bustos and Dan Lipinski both voted against this, because they need something to keep funding their Chicago machine. I am not surprised by that at all. Not even in the slightest am I surprised by that. Because the fines and the prison time that come from marijuana being illegal in Illinois help fund the Chicago machine, and help fund Springfield too, by the way. Millions of Americans' lives have been upended as a result of convictions for possessing small amounts of marijuana, and the racial disparities in conviction rates for those offenses are as shocking as they are unjust, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, a Maryland Democrat, said in a statement after the vote. That's why we passed the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act today. The MORE Act would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act and eliminate criminal penalties for individuals who manufacture, distribute, or possess marijuana. It also includes creating a process to remove prior convictions, known as expungement, and conduct sentencing review hearings for federal cannabis offenses. So, they're going to try it once again. I don't know if they're going to do it or not. I don't know if it's going to work, but they're going to try it once again, and good on them. It's a victimless hobby. The only time that there's a victim is when somebody doesn't get their motherfucking money. But once it's legal, it's victimless. And get some of these people out of prison who are just in there for smoking a fucking J2. Get these people out of there. And of course, you gotta hope and pray that the states and the federal government don't look at this and use this as a way to make this a controlled substance and tax the ever-loving fuck out of it. Which I know of neocons that are very much in favor of that. I am related to one of them. My cousin. Well, I'm not gonna smoke it, but I think they should legalize it and then take control of it and tax the fuck out of it. Yeah, and that only works for a little while. So, we'll see what happens off of this. Hopefully something good. Hopefully this goes somewhere, gets some traction. I have no faith because of the McConnell wall that's going to go up with this. I think the Donald would sign this. I really do. So, we'll see what happens from this. All right, and that's going to be it for the news for the day here. And the last thing that we do on a Monday is something that restores my faith in humanity. And this comes to us from KRON4 out of San Francisco. San Mateo County not adopting new stay-at-home order. From Gail Own. Not all Bay Area counties are locking down early. Those are Sonoma, Napa, Solano, and San Mateo counties. Health leaders in San Mateo County say that while they do appreciate the measures being taken by other counties, they will not be issuing the new stay-at-home order. Instead, they want the public to take extra precautions to protect themselves and slow down the spread of COVID-19. So this is coming out of California, which surprises me in and of itself because the California machine makes sure that everybody stays in line all the time. But I'm glad to see it. I really am. The people can assess their own risk for themselves. That's part of the reason that this country was founded. You give up liberty to have safety, and you deserve neither. People are having their businesses destroyed. Companies are moving out of their major hubs because telecommuting happened. Big cities are losing their tax revenue. Those are good things. But it's because these big cities in these big Democrat-run states have an iron grip on everything. Absolutely everything. They are top-down control for 100%. And the San Mateo County Sheriff's Department said, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that shit here. The people that live here, we trust our people. They know what's best for them. They can decide what's best for them. If they're being stupid with it, then we'll screw with them. But for the most part, they can go out. If they're sick, they stay home. If they're not sick, they can go out and say, okay, well, this is worth the risk. I'm going to go out and do this. And that's where we all need to be. We all need to be looking into this and saying, that's how we need to be operating, under our own risk assessment. And you would be surprised how few people would be out and being reckless just because they could. If a business said, hey, could you social distance? A lot of people would say, you know what? I stand too close to people normally anyway. Yeah, I'll stand 6 feet away from the dude. And even a lot of people, I think, would be more willing to wear the mask if it wasn't a government mandate. I mean, they do it in Japan all the time. People wear the mask just because. There's no government mandate over there. They just do it. Well, there might be now because coronavirus AIDS. But they just do it. Good on the government of San Mateo County for saying, you know what, our people can assess their own risk. And I hope more counties and states across the country follow their lead. We really need to see a lot more of this. And that is going to be it for the day. So, we're going to head on out of here. We will be back here later on tonight for the Red and Ed Show. We've got a good show lined up for that as well. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all there. So, hopefully you guys can come and hang out with us. Other than that, we will be back here tomorrow for more contemporary and more fun news and a lot more stuff that's going on with that. Hope to see you at either one of the shows there. Looking forward to it. Until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.